the deity. I believe it's Radha it's Madan Mohan who drops his garland and in this way indicates his approval for him to write. So you can see that in that section. And I also noted here at some point, perhaps it's there, I don't remember now, but Kṛṣṇadāsa does a lot of praise of Vrindavandas Thakur. He refers to him as the Vyasa of Chaitanya Lila. And he does that early on, I believe it's there in Adi Lila 8, but I forgot to note it. But then again, at the very end of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Lila chapter 20 is the final chapter, and starting with, around verse 70, and then for the next, there's several verses where, again, he is praising Vrindavandas Thakur. So you can say he wants us to understand that he's not alone in what he is doing. And we may want to also understand he's feeling his own dependence on Vrindavandas in his writing of Chaitanya Charitamrita, his dependence on his blessings, but also dependence on the content of what he has written. And somewhere here, I noted, okay, we may get back to that. This is, you have also in your handout, what I find to be a wonderful little, what I like to call a quick start chart for reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. If you've ever purchased any electronic equipment, maybe a laptop computer, if you purchase it new, you open the box and just inside on top of the computer will be a little sheet or folder which is a quick start manual, and it tells you very basic instruction on how to get started. It says things like, take the computer out of the box, take the electric wire, plug it in, and press the on button. So it wants to make sure that you get it. So you can get started. This is something like that, although it certainly is richer. And Swayam Bhagavan Keshava Swami Maharaj, as he's now known, he wrote this as a brahmachari, as Sutta Mahaprabhu. It used to be available, this is just the one page of a very small booklet that he wrote called CC Compact. And up until I don't know when, because just yesterday I was checking, it used to be available for free download as a PDF file. I couldn't find it as a free download anymore. Now it's available for purchase. Okay. But I like what he's done in this chart. He calls it the flow of nectar. We've heard of flow charts, so we might want to say this is the Chaitanya Charitamrita flow chart. And as you see, it flows from the beginning of Adi Lila, and it moves through into the Mad, and through the Madhya Lila, and then through the Antya Lila. So he's indicating that there is a cohesiveness to the Chaitanya Charitamrita in these three divisions. And being the poetic person that he is, Keshava Maharaj has found a heading for each of 12 categories, each one of which ends with T-I-O-N. And so we have invocation, incarnation, education, transformation, renunciation, propagation, aspiration, organization, appreciation, correction, intoxication, and instruction. Starts to sound like a rap song.
Yes.
You may notice also that the number of chapters for each of these 12 categories changes. And so we have for invocation the first 12 chapters, the next incarnation just 2 chapters, then again 2 chapters, then 1 chapter, and you can see yourself all the rest. Now in Antilila, section 9 and 10, you see appreciation and correction, and you'll see that both of these sections are including Antilila chapters 1 through 13. Why was that a printing mistake? No. It's because all these chapters include some appreciation and some correction. The stories, and we'll read some of this, there can be a sort of both of these at the same time, also appreciation and correction. Then the final chapter, Antilila, instruction, 20 is instruction. And of course, this is the chapter in which we have the Shikshamrita of Chaitanya Mahāprabhu, with the sort of dramatic account of how Chaitanya Mahāprabhu is speaking these verses, and he's speaking them in a state of emotion which becomes more and more and more intense as he speaks them. So I think this can be very helpful as a kind of map. What are, major themes of Chaitanya Charitamrita? Well, here they are. You can go by this orientation. Regarding invocation, I would like to mention also one book by Swami Tripurari called, what is it called? Divine Preface, I think it's called, in which he goes into considerable depth of appreciating what Kṛṣṇadāsa Kaviraj is doing in these chapters. Divine Preface. So he's, or Sacred Preface, maybe it's called Sacred Preface. He's, first of all, saying this is a preface to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and yes, it's sacred, and why is it sacred, and how is it sacred? As I mentioned, it's 14 verses, and then it's elaboration on those verses. And just how that all is integrated into a theological message about who is Chaitanya Mahāprabhu and who are his associates. He explains very nicely. And part of the message, we can say, of Kṛṣṇadāsa Kaviraj has to do with this idea of incarnation. Now the word incarnation is, of course, an English word. I I suppose, what is it in Spanish? Encarnación.
Encarnación.
Encarnación, yeah. And of course that all comes from Latin, and that all comes especially in the Christian tradition, in which the theologians of the Christian tradition have come to decide or determine or insist that there's only one incarnation. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his essay, which I mentioned before, called The Bhagavata, it's theology, ethics, no, it's philosophy, ethics, and theology. He mentions the idea of the Christians that there is one and only one Savior, and he says, in effect, well, thank you very much, but we have our own Savior. Our Eastern, he refers to him as our Eastern Savior. I think he says from Nadia. The Eastern Savior from Nadia, something like that. But in any case, just that I think it's useful to be aware that the word incarnation does come from, a certain background. The Sanskrit word, of course, would be avatar. But is Chaitanya Mahāprabhu avatar, or is he avatari? Avatarin, avatari. This is something that Kṛṣṇadāsa wants to make clear. And so he will say, Yada Betam Brahmapani Sharitarapyasya Tanubha Ya Atmantaryami Purusha Itisyo Samshavibha Shadaishvaryai Purno Ya Iha Bhagavan Sasvayamayam Na Chaitanya Chariti, and then I forget the last. It's always like that when I quote a verse. I always forget the last line. When there's an audience. I can remember by myself. I can always remember by myself. He's saying, this Chaitanya, he is none other than the Brahman of the impersonal realization. He is none other than the Paramatma. Who is in the heart. He is none other than Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of God. Okay, but in Chaitanya Charitamrita, as Keshava Maharaj points out, we can understand this is about his actually appearing and how he appears. As he says in his short description here, Nimai is born, his miraculous childhood pastimes endear him to the inhabitants of Navadvip and further confirm his divine identity. So there's a message, there's always a message. Kṛṣṇadāsa Kaviraj always has a message. He has a purpose. We may want to be aware, as he himself says, he's not going to say much about the early pastimes of Chaitanya. Why? Because Vrindavan-das has already done so. And that's where he gives his recommendation for Vrindavan-das Thakur and for the Chaitanya Bhagavata, which at that time was known as Chaitanya Mangala, and which later a committee of Vaiṣṇavas decided we're going to call it Chaitanya Bhagavata. Why? Because Lochandas Thakur has written a Chaitanya Mangala. We don't want to have confusion. And so they ruled that it will now be called Chaitanya Bhagavata. So Kṛṣṇadāsa is saying, I'm just giving a summary of this, but in his summary he's also highlighting, he's making a point And one example of this, maybe we could see, maybe later we could give some time for this interesting point, that so many of the accounts of Chaitanya Lila, there are variations, there are differences. There's something more in this description, something less in that description, something different, something distinct in one and something in another. So one scholar who also spent decades studying Gaudiya Vaishnavism was Joseph O'Connell, who also, before departing the world, he spent considerable time in our center in Oxford. And he wrote a very nice article, which was published in the Journal of Vaiṣṇavas Studies. How many of you are familiar with that journal? Yes. Several years ago, he wrote an article defending Kṛṣṇadāsa as one who was writing not simply a hagiography. Do you know this word, hagiography? A hagiography is a biography of a saint, the purpose of which is not to tell history, but is to tell the glories of the saint in such a way that the readers of the hagiography will be inspired to follow the saint. Other scholars have said, oh, we don't know much of anything about Chaitanya's life. We know that he was born, we know that he died, we know that he married, we know that he renounced. More than that, we don't really know very much. And Joe O'Connell says, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. We have so many details in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And these details are there for a reason. And the reason is that the followers of Caitanya Mahāprabhu were so deeply convinced that this person is so special. He's so special, he must be an avatar of the Lord. Well, maybe he's more than an avatar. And over the decades, the devotees developed a richer and richer understanding of who is Caitanya Mahāprabhu, who we call Mahaprabhu. And in the course of, while he was present, devotees were also so impressed by him that they wanted to, this is what Joseph O'Connell says, they wanted to record what he did, what he said, what were the circumstances around, because for them it was so amazing that the Lord himself has appeared in this world, in this mundane world where people, go in taxis in New York City. No, he wasn't thinking that, maybe. But, the real world of the political situation, the social situation, the material situation, and so on. So they wanted to record this. And Joseph O'Connell, kind of, as a scholar of religion, he says, of course, there's a theological framework in which they are presenting, in which Kṛṣṇadāsa is presenting his account. Of course, he's being selective. But we can also say that about any any account of anyone's life, any biography, we may want to say is historical, but it's still being selective. We don't tell everything about a person's life day by day by day. There was, I remember one person I read about some years back. He found out that he was being tracked by the FBI. He was being watched. So he decided, oh, okay, they want to watch me, I will help them. And so he sent photos, I think several photos every day of his life. he showered them with photos of his life, everything he was doing from morning until night, wherever he was going, whatever he was recording everything and sending it to them. Anyway. So yes, incarnation. Incarnation is referring here just to these first two chapters. And then education. Navadvip is referred to by, I never remember, was it Bhaktivinoda or Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, as the Oxford of the East, because it was a center of learning. And this is why so many pundits converged on Navadvip. It was kind of the place to be if you're into learning. There was Varanasi, of course, but there was also Navadvip. And Navadvip in particular was a center of Nyaya and apparently also grammar. The study of grammar, Sanskrit grammar. Some people make a whole universe out of the study of Sanskrit grammar. That's another topic. But Chaitanya Mahāprabhu was in that world. According to one scholar, he would have been more into grammar than into Nyaya, logic, but whatever, in any case. Nyaya was a major subject of interest for the people, for the scholars of Navadvip, and it was, as I understand, in Navadvip that the notion of Navanyaya developed. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who is also known as Vasudeva Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, was in Navadvip, and he was teaching Navanyaya before he went to Puri and became the Raja Guru of Prataparudra. So Nimai becomes known as Nimai Pandit. It seems that he was very skilled, very learned, very knowledgeable in these two subjects. And it's said, it's not mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it's said that Chaitanya, Nimai Pandit, and Gadadhar would have discussions on grammar, and they would argue, and Chaitanya Mahāprabhu would defeat Gadadhar. And it's said that Nimai Pandit, as I remember, wrote something on Sanskrit grammar, which is now lost. And why is it lost? Do you know? It's lost because,
Is this the Tattva Chintamani commentary? Or,
maybe that's the title, I don't remember.
That he threw it in the Ganga?
He threw it in the Ganga. Why did he throw it in the Ganga?
Because there was a Raghunath Chintamani who was preparing to elevate his career and was feeling that he'll be eclipsed by Mahaprabhu's commentary.
This is something even I didn't know. My understanding was he didn't want Gadadhar to feel bad, but perhaps both. Gadadhar and Nimai were very close, and he didn't want to hurt the feelings of Gadadhar. But yes, it could also be because of what was this?
Raghunath Chintamani?
Raghunath Chintamani. Okay. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Later on, it describes how, just near to the end of his teaching, he starts explaining grammar in relation to Krishna's names.
Mm-hmm.
And his students are a bit disturbed by his bringing everything to Krishna.
They're a bit very disturbed by that, yes.
I just wondered if Jiva Goswami's Charitamrita Vyakarana is a fulfillment of that project, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we can think of it that way, why not? Yes. In case anyone doesn't know, later Jiva Goswami writes a Sanskrit grammar called the Harinamamrita Vyakarana. It is a Vyakarana, which means grammar, and it's Harinamamrita Vyakarana. He incorporates, or he takes names of Krishna as ways for exemplifying, for making examples for his grammar. And I can't say much of anything more than that because I haven't studied Harinamamrita Vyakarana, although now there is a nice translation of I think there's a short version, a medium, and a long version. I think this is the medium version. All I remember from attending some classes for a few days in Vrindavan is that Jiva Goswami gives the name Vamana to the short vowels, and Trivikrama to the long vowels, right? Some of you, I see you can study this. So I think Jiva Goswami had a sense of humor also. And he says in the beginning of his Harinamamrita Vyakarana that he feels he wants to help the poor Vaiṣṇavas who are suffering from reading Panini's grammar, which is very dry. So he wants to give them Amrita. So Hari Nama Amrita, Vyakaran. He's giving the nectar. And this is what Chaitanya Mahāprabhu was experiencing, we may want to say, after he comes back from Gaya, after he's been initiated by Ishvarapuri, after he has received from him mantra. And there's some discussion, which mantra did he actually receive? But I won't go there. We generally understand he received the Maha Mantra, but it's possible he received a different, 10-syllable mantra, I believe. Yeah. And after he experiences, as Kṛṣṇadāsa Kaviraj describes, after he experiences such intense emotion, so already at the beginning, and this is something I think myself and so many devotees feel sort of, how come he could just immediately feel so much ecstasy from chanting Hare Krishna? Yeah. And he feels maybe it's a problem. why am I feeling this, such intense disturbance? So he goes back to his guru, right? And he asks him, and what does his guru respond? He says, "That's great. You're on the right track." And then he quotes a verse from the 11th canto of Bhagavatam. Let's see if I can remember this one. Evam vrata svapriyanama kirtya jatana rago drupta chitta uchai asatyato roditi rauti gayatyam madhavam rijati loka bahya. Persons who take up the chanting, taking a vow of chanting, what happens to them? A lot of things happen. They start laughing and crying and singing and dancing. And do they care what other people think of them? No. Lokabhaya. They just become so intensely overwhelmed with what we call ecstasy, but which may be a combination of ecstasy and ecstasy. Ecstasy is a word that was coined by one scholar of religion back in the 60s, Mircea Eliade, to distinguish it from ecstasy, which he says is about the external manifestations of intense emotion. There will also be internal manifestations of emotion. That's, he would say, ecstasy. Okay, so a little about the structure from another perspective, structure of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Obviously, we have this three-part division, Adi Lila, Madhya Lila, and Antya Lila. And Kṛṣṇadāsa also tells us about this structure, and he tells us at the same time about a two-part division he wants to make. And that two-part division is according to the number of years of Mahaprabhu's early life and his later life. So he speaks of the Chaitanya, he speaks of Lord Chaitanya's life as being in two parts, 24 years each. As a kind of, simple, clear division of his life. He says the first part is his householder life, and the second part is his life as a renunciant. Of course, he was not a householder as we normally understand householder all of the 24 years of his first part of his life. We would say after he married, then he was a householder, but in a broader sense you could say he was living with his parents. We don't have any reference to him going away from home for some time to live in an ashram of the Guru. Rather, he was always at home, in any case. So in that broader sense, we might want to say householder. And then, of course, the second part of his life is as a renunciant. We might want to think about this also, and sometimes I may want to just say, here's a theme, something you can reflect on as you read Chaitanya Charitamrita. The theme of the relationship between renunciation and devotion in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And one aspect of why I think this is interesting in Chaitanya Charitamrita is in a context which is not directly discussed in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but which I think may be relevant. And that is when is Kṛṣṇadāsa writing Chaitanya Charitamrita? He's writing toward the end of, we don't know exactly when he started writing it. We also don't know exactly when he ended, but it seems that he completed it in the early years of what we call the 17th century. So up to 1615 seems to be the end year when he would have been writing. So he could have been writing from maybe from the 90s, 1590s, through into the 10s and possibly later. Now, what else is going on in Vrindavan at the time that he is writing? Well, one thing that's going on is that the Vallabha Sampradaya is getting established. So what, you may say? Well, where are they getting established? Well, where are they establishing themselves? They're establishing themselves at the south end of Govardhan Hill. There's a town there. You know the name of the town? Jatipur, yes. And Jatipur is a kind of, it's one headquarters of the Vallabha Sampradaya. And they have a big temple there with a deity of Giriraj, Nathaji, Sri Nathaji. The original deity is in Rajasthan, in a town called Nathadwar. Who's been to Nathadwar? Anyone? Yes? You managed to get darshan of Nathaji?
Mangalarti
Mangalarti?
as well, yeah.
The whole Mangalarti?
I believe, yeah, it was pretty quiet for that time.
Oh.
Yeah, but otherwise usually it's a few seconds.
Yeah, they push you out. There's big crowds and anyway. So they say that Nathaji comes to this temple in Govardhan to receive worship every evening. The evening arti, he's actually there. And that's when he's worshipped there. The point, though, is that the Vallabha Sampradaya is very much, it's very much a householder kind of sampradaya. They're acharyas, to the present day, they're all householders, mostly with big handlebar mustaches. And their way of worship is worshiping the deity, and they worship the deity in great opulence. And devotees in the Vallabha Sampradaya, householders, typically it's very much the seva of the ladies of the household to do the worship in the home, spending several hours every morning doing the worship, typically of, well, Nachi, they will have a form of Nachi, and or apparently they'll have Bala Gopal, baby Krishna. Why? Because their mood is Vatsalya. They want to think of Krishna as a child, depending on their service. That's the Vallabhas. What's happening on the north end of Govardhan Hill? Well, there's Shyamakund and Radhakund. And who is living at Shyamakund and Radhakund? The Goswamis. And who else is living there? Kṛṣṇadāsa Kaviraj. For some time, at least, he was, I was shown the room where there's some sadhu living in there now. There's a little room where apparently he was living just up from Radhakund, Shyamakund. And what is the mood of the Goswamis? It's certainly not that of the Grihastha Vallabha Acharyas. It's very different. Their worship of Krishna is not Balakrishna, it is Radha Krishna. And Radha Krishna are present in Radha Kund Shyamakunda, right? And what does Rupa Goswami write in his Upadeshamrita, which is altogether 11 verses? He dedicates the last 3 of those 11 verses to Radha Kunda. In their mood of worshipping Radha and Krishna, their mood is one of very strong, intense renunciation. So this is going on. This is going on as Chaitanya Mahāprabhu, as Kṛṣṇadāsa Kaviraj is writing Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it seems to me that one thing he wants to do is to highlight this difference. And so especially in the Madhya Lila and Antya Lila, this comes out, this importance of renunciation. But it's not just renunciation, it's renunciation in bhakti. And there's a tension there, and we'll come to that. Okay, so there's education, and then there's transformation, and this is, of course, telling, I'll just read, Nimai receives initiation into the chanting of Krishna's names, transforms into a devotional live wire, and begins to popularize congregational chanting as the prime means of spiritual elevation. He then accepts the order of sannyas and becomes known as Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So a lot happens in that one chapter, Adi Lila. And here, I think, is worth mentioning a contrast with Vrindavan Das Thakur's Chaitanya Bhagavata. Chaitanya Bhagavata, the first, he also divides his work into 3 parts. He calls them Adi Kanda, Madhya Kanda, and Antya Kanda, not Adi Lila, Madhya Lila, Antya Lila. The term Kanda we know from the Ramayana. The Ramayana has 7 kandas, divisions. So it's kind of, as I understand, a pretty neutral term. Kṛṣṇadāsa Kaviraj wants us to know this is Leela. This is something special going on. And so he refers to it as Adi Leela, etc. Chaitanya Bhagavata, Adi Kanda includes, it describes Lord Chaitanya's childhood and youth coming up to his, and including his initiation by Ishvarapuri. So in that respect, you can say there is a parallel. However, Kṛṣṇadāsa goes further because he describes Mahaprabhu's return to Navadvip and his decision to take sannyas. This is all in the Adi Lila. Incidentally, has anyone been to Gaya? Vaiṣṇavas generally don't go to Gaya. I went to Gaya once. It was on the way. I forget. I was going either to or from. I think I was going from Varanasi to Mayapur, and it was on the way, so I made a stop in Gaya. I was by myself. I was on a bus. And I got off the bus in Gaya. And the instant I got off the bus, 2 or 3 Brahmins ran up to me to get me to come with them to proceed to have them guide me through a process of shraddha rites for any of my ancestors. So the first one who came, I kind of knew this was going to happen. The first one who came, I said, okay, let's go. So he marched me over to a kind of portico area near the main Vaiṣṇavas temple and sat me down. First, we stopped at a shop to get all the samagris, and of course I paid for that and got everything together, and then okay, we paid, and then we went, we sat down, and then he paced me through a process of making offerings and chanting mantras and different offerings and chanting mantras and so on. And we were coming to the end of the process, and I could tell, and I was listening to him, and he was saying in Hindi, because he asked me, which language do you want to do this in, Hindi or Bengali? I said Hindi because I have this much knowledge of Hindi and this much knowledge of Bengali. Okay, let's take Hindi. And we were coming to the end of the procedure, and I knew we were coming to the end because he was having me chant a mantra in which I was making a vow, a promise, that I would give him dakshin. Because I knew enough Hindi that when he said, 2,000 rupiah, that means 2,000 rupees. Well, nowadays 2,000 rupees is not much. But when I did this, it was kind of, for me, as a brahmachari, it was actually kind of a lot of money. So he said, 2,000 rupiah, I said, no! So we bargained. And I got him down to 200 rupees. And as soon as it was done, he told me, now you have to give also dakshin to the Brahmins. The Brahmins. Where are the Brahmins? Oh, here they come. And the moment we stopped, there were 2 or 3, I guess they were Brahmins, came like rushing up, come on. Now you have to give, oh, okay. So I gave a few rupees and they seemed to be satisfied. Yeah. But it was nice to be in Gaya, knowing that Chaitanya Mahāprabhu was there, and knowing that he had been in the temple, it's called the Vaiṣṇavas temple. What's in the Vaiṣṇavas temple is a pada of Vishnu. It's a large stone, and the stone has an imprint which is roughly shaped like a footprint, and it's a quite large footprint. And the understanding is that this was, at least one explanation, this was the foot of Vamanadev. When he lifted his other foot and became Trivikrama as he pierced the universe with his other foot. That foot print is there. And the description is that Chaitanya Mahāprabhu, when he saw that, he lost it. There's actually two versions, though, at least. One is that he became overwhelmed with intense feeling when he saw the footprint. The other is that he was overwhelmed in meeting Ishvarakuri. Yeah. Well, it is that time, isn't it? Time for our...
Yes, so